This is fun. We're getting together for our third chat. And for those of you that we've invited to listen in today, it's kind of a fun story how Karen and I have met. We never met in person. We met because our publishers are friends. We both have books releasing in the month of May, which maybe is when you are joining us today. But because our publishers are friends, mine said to me, hey, you might like this one. You're a clergy wife. You might like this great book that just came out called The Minister's Wife. And I said, yes, send me a copy. And I started reading it and I couldn't put it down. And then turns out that Karen's publisher sent her a copy of mine because we're releasing on the same day.
Yep.
And so
this life we share.
We emailed each other. And then we had like an hour and a half chat on FaceTime. And then we decided, let's just record these Zoom conversations because others may want to be part of a conversation like we're having as well. So our first chat, we talked about friendship and loneliness. Our second, we talked about the challenges of moving and relocation. And now today, in about 13 or 14 minutes, we want to talk about clergy marriage.
Yes.
So.
And I would like to begin by saying I'm in my bedroom, but that's not because we're talking about marriage.
I love that. You were in your kitchen before when we talked that.
Exactly. So that's not a good place to talk about marriage, maybe.
Okay. But I'm in a closet, so I don't know what that means. I'm in a walk-in closet that is my office. So there you go.
Oh, that's good. Well, your chapter title where you most talk about marriage, but of course your husband is woven throughout your book, as is in mine, obviously, but your title's called that chapter's called Putting the Salsa Back in Your Marriage, which immediately I perked up to the title. I just loved it. And one line you say that really struck me is, what you love you defend. And I thought that is just, if we thought of our marriage in no other way, that is a great way to think about marriage. And I do think that as women who are married to pastors, or in whatever form they're serving at this time, there are unique, I think, pressures on clergy marriage that make it even more difficult. And for us, and I write pretty freely about this in The Minister's Wife, marriage has been hard work. We're really different, and we have loved each other well, and we love each other well, but marriage is work. And in the church pressure cooker of ministry, it can be more difficult. So did you find that, Maggie? I mean, maybe it's not true for everybody.
Yeah. Oh no, I think it is, because marriage is hard work for everybody. We all know that. For us, it's been 44 years. For you and Brent, 30?
Yeah.
30, yeah. Yeah. And to protect something valuable for that long is not easy. There's all kinds of pressures from the inside. There's pressures from the outside. So we have to work at it. And one of the things I appreciated that you said, Karen, is you said, there will be fights because we are so different. It's like, I remember you saying, Brent and I are not like two little kittens curled up in the same basket, just purring along.
We're like lions.
There's times that the claws come out, and sometimes we take it out on the people closest to us. So many of us have had that experience. One of the things you said, and I highlighted this, you said, as it turns out, we can fight about anything. It's the how of the fight that really matters, not the what. But and this metaphor really touched me. If you can take the fight by its clenched fist and lead it into the safety of your love and into a room with the lights on, this is always better than silence and retreat or pretending to get along.
Yeah.
And I think for so many of us, and clergy is no exception, sometimes it's the fight or flight thing. Yeah, we fight or we just retreat and we don't talk about it. Of course, we know what scripture says, don't let the sun go down in your anger, but we're all human.
I don't do that.
And I think it begins by just acknowledging we all know about gender differences. In fact, I've said to women, he ain't your girlfriend.
Right.
I mean, you can't expect. And I've also said that often that unstated expectations are unfair expectations.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I think that's super helpful. They can't read our minds, for one thing, even though that would be a lot better.
That's right. When Mike and I were first married, I thought, well, if he loved me, he would know blank.
Exactly.
And that's not fair.
Yeah.
I
think expectations are a huge problem. And for clergy marriages, I read a stat this morning from, I think it was a Christianity Today study, 86% of pastors' spouses feel their congregation has expectations that their marriage should be a role model for others. And I think, and you know what, that's just what they feel. Maybe the church doesn't actually have that expectation, but I feel like probably that's true. I feel like probably the church, and I guess for good reason, hopes that the pastor's marriage will be, above reproach, of course. But those are two very real people in marriage together, and our marriages aren't perfect. So we need to be able to somehow talk about that and have trusted people we can share with. And for me, that's often been other ministers' wives. I seek out other ministers' wives like a, heat-seeking missile or something.
Heat-seeking missile.
A friendship missile.
Oh, that's good. Not a Scud missile, no.
To connect with and talk with. And I really, if there's one bit of advice I have for marriage, it's have good friends who understand your life and whom you can speak with.
That's right. And while you and I have always had good friends in our congregations, that's a subject we talked about in an earlier chat. I know you've also written in your book that we have to be very careful about if it's a struggle we're going through in our marriage, that I would not share with somebody in my church, because my husband's their pastor. Yeah. And I would share with other clergy wives because they get the pressure. They know that sometimes the clergy person is under so much pressure that they're going to feel free to express that at home, and we may feel the weight of that. Yeah. But to me, it would be exposing too much to go to my best buddy in the church and say, "Oh, Mike and I just wouldn't do it." There's other safe places we can go, and when you need to, you do exactly what you tell your congregation. You haul yourselves off for counseling.
Right, exactly.
There's no shame in that. We're all going to need somebody outside of ourselves to be able to do that, just to acknowledge our differences, to help us find good ways, saying it's not that you're never going to fight, but how are you going to do it safely? How are you going to fight fair and honor each other in it and protect what you've got? So,
yes. And you know what? Protecting what you've got, that is something that you do so well in your salsa chapter, where you talk about how we can do that. Like it's almost like a preventative piece, I would say. So you're talking about adjusting expectations, but I love that you just say laugh often, like have fun. For me, that's been a issue in clergy life, is like there can be a heaviness, right? There can be a burden after burden after burden. There can be a lot of worry and stress and strain on your husband in particular. And, it can be easy to forget to have fun. And we need to do that. And that's, now Brent may disagree, but that's something that I've tried to push in our marriage. Like, let's go do something fun,
That's right. And we don't want to squash each other's dreams. Yeah. I use an example in the book, and I think you and I have chatted about this back when we were getting ready to get out of seminary. My husband had this idea, which I thought was nuts at the time, and we had to compromise, but he wanted to travel for a year. We were still young. We didn't have any kids yet. He said, before we take our first full-time job, and we're going to be in the saddle for the next 40, 50 years, he said, let's travel and see the country. And I was like, how are we going to save enough money to do that? Well, anyway, make a long story short, he said a year, I said a month. He said 6 years, I said 2 months. We compromised at 4. We had saved $2,000, which was big money for us, $500 a month, which didn't allow for eating in restaurants or staying in hotels. So with a pup tent and some cans of tuna, we traveled the country for 4 months. We called it retirement at 26.
Oh, that is so good.
We still look back on that as one of the best times of our lives, and something we knew wouldn't come again till we're in the season that we are right now. We're older, and we are doing interim work, but not in a full-time parish anymore. But it really is important to have fun. And
you know what strikes me about, as you were sharing that story, Maggie, which you do write about so well, is that there's something about doing things if you can, when you can. So, I'm 53. We are starting to talk in the way of like, we need to start doing some of these things, because I'm sure you've had tragic stories come your way of friends who, I don't know, that whatever, something went wrong. Maybe somebody died early and they didn't get a chance to do some of the things they've been putting off. So there's something in there for me about the wisdom of doing things when you can. Like, it doesn't have to be big 4-month-long trips, of course. Most of us can't do that now, but we can, do a little weekend trip. Well, we can't, but
yeah. Do you remember, fans of Downton Abbey? Maybe you remember one of the of the counter, whatever her name was. Anyway, the Violet, the Dowager Countess, whatever they call it, older lady with all the zingers.
Yes,
yeah, I can't think of the actress right now, but she used to say, "What is a weekend?" And I thought, boy, every clergy would be like, "Yeah, what is a weekend? We don't know what a weekend is."
But that is a real thing. Like there's after many years as well, that adds up, the absence of the weekend. And yet you may get a wonderful 4-week chunk off in the summer. And believe me, I am so grateful for that. But there is kind of a, relenting pace that clergy families follow typically. Mm-hmm. And I actually still hear that joke. Like, somebody said that joke to me in the last 6 weeks about, so Brent only works on Sunday. Ah, ha, ha.
I know. It is not funny.
Oh, not funny. Yeah.
It's not funny at all.
World, stop saying that joke.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But then sometimes it's hard to explain, how busy they are. People don't get it. And that's okay. People don't have to get it, but we need to be aware.
And they don't realize that sometimes the opposite. It's very easy. Oh. I've heard clergy wives describe the church as their husband's mistress.
Yeah, I've heard that too many times.
They don't mean that in a sexual sense, but it's the third person in the marriage.
Exactly.
And, I've heard women say, we'd be in the car ready to go somewhere and the phone would ring and we'd say, "Dad, no, don't. Yeah. We're leaving on vacation." And he'd say, "I got to get this." And he'd come back out and we would all climb out of the car and the vacation was over because somebody had died and my dad.
Exactly.
And that's not a good boundary to set up, I think, for other who's are just entering the clergy. People have got to know we're not God. We love them. We want to help meet their needs. But if we don't protect our marriages, a toxic marriage can then actually create problems for the whole church.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And
absolutely.
One of the things you talk about, Karen, is you say, I got a problem with marriage formulas. And I thought,
because I'm terrible at them.
There's too many books that give formulas. Formulas don't work unless you're a mathematician. Because you said, if I can quote, you said, it's better if we just agree that we love God and each other, and He brought us together to stay together. We believe that our marriage and our home is a hospitable place for both of us. We belong here, and we are each other's safest haven, and that this is the place where we love each other and reach out to love the world, which God has asked us to do as individuals and as a couple. We help each other love better, even as we are each other's toughest projects. I thought, amen, sister.
Oh, thanks, Maggie.
Gosh, and I know our time, we decided we'd keep these chats short so they're accessible to people, and it's just about up. But you know what I'd love to end with, Karen, is you use the analogy in your chapter on marriage about treating your marriage like a child.
Yes.
Now, can you unpack that? Because
absolutely. Well, it was our pastor who married us, who's still a good friend, very dear friend, who gave us that picture in our, pre-marriage counseling. And he basically said, treat your marriage like it's a third person or like it's a child, and tend to it. And for me, that has been the one, piece of marriage advice that I think does work for everybody. And so in the book, that as I, played with metaphor, that picture came back to life for me again. And I was imagining our marriage as a child, like even on a swing, who needs to have some fun every now and then and eat chocolate and know that we are there for our marriage and of course then for each other. So yeah.
I think that's a wonderful piece of just counsel for us to end with, not original to you or to me, but to the pastor who married you 30 years ago.
Thank you,
to
Doug.
think of our marriage as someone outside of ourselves who needs protection. She said, she requires us to check in on her, and she needs chocolate and water and champagne. And our fiercest protection and maybe even to be pushed high on a swing occasionally. I love that.
Thank you, Maggie.
Because it's got to be fun, and we've got to return to the source of our joy and what brought us together in the first place, knowing that there's unique pressures on clergy marriages, but there's also some great unique challenges and privileges to be there, in a sense, as the mom and a pop of a congregation who loves you and you love them. But also when you need to, you got to have time away from them. And that's part of protecting marriage too.
And according to Maggie,
Oh,
salsa.
you got to have some
salsa in your marriage. I love
those weren't original with me. A bunch of young moms in our former church and we came up with those.
It's so good.
SALSAs, not a formula, but just say things that you can, laugh a lot and acknowledge your differences. And one of the S's in salsa is sexual intimacy. So, well, that's a topic for another time.
And I don't want to talk about that in my bedroom.
Your bedroom. Okay.
So awkward.
Well, I think in our next chat, we're going to talk a little bit about parenting, right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. We'll see. We're going to cover the whole deal in 15 minutes. So we're just going to look forward to how we do this. So.
All right.
So thanks, Karen.
See you next time.
And those of you who've joined us, we're so glad for listening in. Thanks so much for sharing this time with us.